I love all of you. Yo, fine scouts and intrepid internet travelers. Welcome to my channel. I'm Josh, your binge buffoon, if you will have me. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Yes, I'm a week late on reviewing this, and probably no one cares, especially on a small channel like mine, but my sister and her boyfriend invited me to go see it today. Thank you guys for inviting me, and apologies to everyone I annoyed by taking notes in my phone, because I wanted to do this. I went into this movie with very high expectations, and I knew that if it met those expectations and or exceeded them, I would want to talk about it on this channel. So I'm going to say that in this moment, on the day of seeing it, it's my favorite Marvel movie since Endgame. Before I went to see this movie, I was talking to my buddy Alex about nerd culture and how, not necessarily being a nerd, but nerd culture is cool now. Or at least cooler than when we were growing up. Anime, for example, is more mainstream than ever. When I was a kid, Dragon Ball wasn't cool, even though it's so cool. Classmates or whoever would mock me about when Piccolo grew that tail. And obviously, he's never grown a tail, but clearly they've seen it if they know the name Piccolo and know that other characters grow tails. So stop being a closet fan and just embrace the things that you actually enjoy. Stop being ashamed of the things you actually enjoy. Stop being ashamed of who you are. Clearly, I have issues that need to be dealt with. I'm a resentful, bitter man. But we all have issues. And even when life is good, there's still a lot we can do to better ourselves. Because nothing is perfect, and we never will be. And I say that because at the beginning of Guardians 3, life is good. The group of misfits are one big happy-ish family on Nowhere, which is their home base. Although Star-Lord's drunk and upset about Gamora. That said, there are things that need to be dealt with. The most important of which is Rocket's backstory, origin, trauma, whatever you want to call it. In previous movies, Rocket never talked about his past. It was alluded to that he'd been experimented on, that he didn't like being called a raccoon or a freak, and this film makes him confront that using Adam Warlock. I'll get to how I feel like he's more of a plot device than a character in this film. I know everyone's been saying that this is Rocket's movie. I'm more comfortable saying that the film revolves around Rocket. It's very much a Guardians movie, and I think it does justice by pretty much every character, except for Adam Warlock. In the present, so to speak, Rocket's unconscious for most of the movie until the final act, which I think really works because it reminds us and shows us how much his family, his surrogate family, loves him and the lengths they're willing to go to save him, which makes the entire film more emotional. Just seeing how upset everyone is and hearing Peter say or refer to Rocket as the best friend he needs to save. Because he can't lose someone else, right? He lost his mom, he lost Gamora. Oh, Chris Pratt does a really good job in the moment near the end where you think Rocket's going to die. I went into this film assuming he would die. And I think I've heard people say that. Years ago when I knew this film was happening, I assumed someone would die. No one dies. It's a very happy-ish ending. And I love it. I'm not disappointed that there wasn't a death. Anyway, I think the setup with them on Nowhere and then Rocket getting hurt and the flashes back to his origin story really set the film up nicely. We get to see his first family, I guess you could call them, before the Guardians, the one that the High Evolutionary experimented on in an effort to create the perfect race or society, culture, whatever. Yeah, the High Evolutionary, man. Chukwudi Iwuji. Sorry if I mispronounced that, bro. You were amazing in this film. You were just such an evil villain. There was nothing redemptive about you. At one point during the movie, my sister leans over and goes, "He's worse than Thanos." And he is. He's way worse than Thanos. Thanos, especially in Infinity War, you kind of understood where he was coming from. To this day, I'll still... Because, you know, sometimes you get in weird conversations about stuff like population control. And there's that whole Thanos was right thing. Yeah, there's none of that here. The High Evolutionary is a terrible person. But he's depicted so well in a franchise about imperfection. You know, this group of misfits that we fell in love with in 2014. There isn't a more perfect villain to finish out the story of this group than one who's obsessed with eliminating imperfection or defeating him, hammers home that what makes life beautiful is those little oddities, those little imperfect things, right? That exist within all of us. The things we need to come to terms with in order to really be ourselves. And there's a lot of that in this film, and that's one of the reasons I love it so much. I must say, this film was way more brutal than I expected. Not only was watching Rocket and his friends endure what they endured heart-wrenching, and I think it I assume did a lot to raise awareness for animal cruelty and experimentation, because there's this message in here, especially when they save all the animals after saving the human children at the end of the film. There's this message in here about appreciating life in all of its forms. But on top of that, the Guardians just body people. I half imagined a kill count in the corner of the screen when in the theater, and then lost track. It certainly feels like James Gunn came off of Peacemaker when he filmed this or wrote this. Well, I know he wrote this a long time ago, but when he made this. And that's a good thing, because the brutality, the violence, the things that you didn't expect to see in this were necessary. It added weight to everything. And I'm totally down with the MCU maturing. For those who are familiar with the comics, Moon Knight should have been a lot more brutal than it was. If the MCU depicts brutality as tactfully as this film moving forward, even though we have Deadpool 3 on the way, and I think that's going to be Marvel Studios' first R-rated film, the violence in that's more just humor. I guess I'm more talking about projects like Daredevil Born Again, which needs to be brutal in order to do characters like the Punisher justice. And I imagine it will, because I don't think John Bernthal would have said yes to coming back as the Punisher if he didn't think they were going to do right by his character. I digress. This film was brutal, but necessarily brutal, which brings me to the action. Of course, this movie was visually impressive, but the action was... I'm trying to think of an adjective that's more appropriate than amazing, but I'm just going to say amazing because it was amazing. Off the top of my head, the fight with Adam Warlock at the beginning of the film was dope. The fight with Groot and Peter, when Peter's got his guns. I love how they set that up, where Peter gave Groot his guns when they got in the car. He goes, "You know what to do with this." And then they're on that ship as the High Evolutionary ship with all his goons when they're leaving Earth 2.0 and it's exploding beneath them, and Groot and Peter are shooting all the goons. Groot's kind of protecting them, and it's all over the place. That was fucking cool. And then, of course, I'm sure you know I'm going to mention this, the hallway sequence. After they make that decision and they get their cool walk to Beastie Boys' No Sleep Till Brooklyn, that hallway fight, that's Disney's best hallway fight. I'm sorry, Vader. I'm sorry, Luke. That was fucking awesome. This group of Guardians at the height of their power. That's what that showed. And in the coolest way possible. These films have always had jukebox-worthy soundtracks. And I love how James Gunn's selection is always so intentional. I've heard that when he writes the scripts, certain sequences or moments, in the script, it says what song he wants to use. And then he prays he can get the rights for it. And sometimes he has to switch to different tunes and whatnot. But for the most part, he knows how he wants the movie to sound. The soundtrack in this is as important as it was in any of the other films. And I knew it would be. When I saw the first trailer set to Space Hogs in the Meantime, or a version of that song, I just knew it. I mean, hell, I watched the trailer again before I did this review, and it still gets me emotional. Even after watching the film, it still gets the juices flowing. And I had the biggest smile on my face at the end of the film when Rocket goes to the 2000 era playlist on the Zune and plays Florence, Dog Days Are Over. I forgot how much I love that song. I was tapping my toes in the air, you know, in the Dream Lounger. And I had my shoes off because don't worry about it. I don't know. The jokes. This was the funniest Guardians film out of the three, in my opinion. Probably because sometimes I think the humor in these films, especially, and I know people are going to disagree with me on this, I especially felt that way with the Guardians Holiday Special. Sometimes the humor can feel forced. It may be a tad bit juvenile. Like the thing about immature humor, which is oftentimes the best kind of humor, is the delivery, which can be it can be very difficult to pull off. Don't come at me, okay? This is just my opinion. Everything worked in this, though. Or at least worked enough that I'm using the word everything here. Jokes seemed to come back around in such an organic way, and it made the script feel super tight. I know Gunn had a lot of time with this script, and it really shows. Because the gags always were a byproduct of the film's relationships or the plot existing within banter or dynamics, it just worked. Everything just flowed so perfectly. And like everything James Gunn, writer-director, seems to touch, this film had so much heart, which is why it won me over. And I'm going to overlook a lot of its imperfections because, I mean, this film, it's all about overlooking imperfections, right? Dare I say it had so much wisdom, this film. And it handled its characters perfectly. That's why I say it revolved around Rocket. It wasn't necessarily his film. Although Rocket, I've never liked Rocket more as a character than after watching the third film in this trilogy. He's so fucking great as a character. But I can say that about all of these characters. But yeah, it isn't his film. It's a Guardians film. And it does right by them in so many ways. The ragtag group of imperfect misfits who love each other despite their flaws. This movie made me cry multiple times, often when I didn't expect. For example, there's this moment in the third act when Nebula, Mantis, and Drax are on the baddie ship. Drax just did something stupid. And Nebula is tearing him a new asshole about it. She's calling him dumb, yada, yada, yada. And Mantis sticks up for Drax. And she says, well, she calls out Nebula, saying you always have to find fault with people to feel better about yourself. I'm paraphrasing, which she does throughout the movie. And this film does that, where everyone has character development, even when it's subtle. But Mantis says to Nebula, after Nebula says to Mantis that Drax is a liability, she says that Drax is the only one that doesn't hate himself. He makes us laugh and he loves us. Who cares if he's dumb? And I just started crying. It was so beautiful. Mantis really came into her own in this film. A lot. I need to say how much I love Nebula. Because I do. I think I would argue she has the best character arc in the MCU. She's like the Vegeta of this entire universe. There's a moment when Rocket is good. You know, they save him. The kill switch in his heart, they've dealt with. Rocket's alive. And Nebula hears Rocket's voice over the comm, right? And she starts crying. And it just made me think about how her and Rocket were the only two of the Guardians that survived the snap, right? And the time they spent with each other and the bond that they probably have. That was a beautiful moment too. I love those two together. We didn't get to see much of them, but I like that they have a relationship, you know? It's just such a human franchise, which is so ironic to say considering it takes place in outer space, in a very unrealistic universe, but it is. I mean, just lines like everyone deserves a second chance, which is such a, I guess, cliche thing to say. I mean, you've heard it a million times before. Groot says it technically. I mean, Drax says it. He interprets for Groot after Groot saves Adam Warlock. Obviously, when I heard that, I couldn't help but think how, well, James Gunn was fired for inappropriate tweets by Disney and then rehired. And that whole instance is just something that happens all the time. We're so quick to condemn other people, even when they don't necessarily deserve it. We all say fucked up things sometimes. We all do fucked up things. There's obviously a severity scale, but we have to allow each other to make mistakes. Even Adam Warlock, who's just an infant killing people, he doesn't understand why. He was thrust into this world. He doesn't understand the severity of his actions. A lot of us don't until it's too late. I know that James Gunn wrote this film before his ridiculous firing and subsequent rehiring. So I thought there might be some things that were shoehorned in to make it feel like more contemporary MCU. Thankfully, nothing felt forced, and I'm happy it just focused on its franchise and its trilogy while adequately dealing with the Gamora stuff. Going into this film, as much as I wanted Peter and Gamora to end up together or have this past Gamora's soul merge with the deceased Gamora in some convoluted, nonsensical way so they could have their happy ending, the way that they dealt with that relationship or issue was very adult. It was very mature. It was the right way to handle it because it didn't retcon the loss of the OG Gamora that we felt in Infinity War for the sake of some, Sam and Diane, will they, won't they sort of thing. The reference to the first film. It allowed this Gamora to remain her own character. And she kind of sucks at first. She is Thanos' daughter. She's a dick. But she gets to learn about love and kindness in a way that feels very realistic and progressive. This version of Gamora gets to find herself. And while she's not the version that Peter wanted her to be, she ends up in a place that's pretty good too. There's even a line where past Gamora says to Peter, "What's wrong with you that you need me to be this person?" Which speaks volumes to Peter's character and how incomplete he's always felt. Which is why I really do like his ending. Like Rocket, he's done running, Like I said before, I'm sure this film has a bunch of issues, but I don't really care because imperfection is beautiful, and that's kind of the whole point of this film. I will say that at the end of the film, everyone essentially decides to go their separate ways, or at least Peter and Mantis and Gamora leave. The only endings that really felt earned, I'm going to regret saying this. Peter's made a lot of sense, and it felt earned. Rocket becoming the captain felt very earned. Drax's whole dad thing makes so much sense considering the character's backstory, but it did feel shoehorned at the end. I like that he's the dad now. I like that. Nebula, I can get down with it. Mantis, again, they sort of threw that in there. I don't know. It works. It definitely works, and it makes sense for all the characters. But when they're like, okay, by the way, I think we should split up. I'm just like, you guys did all this for each other, and I love you as a family. Why are you doing this? But that is life. Things end. And things aren't beautiful because they last. Also, you do see certain things coming in this. The second Kraglin called Cosmo a bad dog, I knew that there would be a moment at the end of the film where he called her a good dog. And I knew the second Peter's grandpa came up, that at the end of the film, he would go see his grandpa. I didn't think Adam Warlock would be such a non-factor. He's a source of humor. He's more of a plot device than a character, to be honest. So it kind of feels like he was included simply because he was in that Guardians 2 end credits scene. And because I'm sure Kevin Feige and company have plans for him down the road. And of course, he saves Peter in space. In this franchise, we always have someone on the verge of death in space moment. More often than not, it involves Peter. It's a cornerstone of the Guardians trilogy. Still, Will does a great job with what he has to work with, and I think the character can definitely be a standout moving forward. Just with his whole regal demeanor and whatnot, it works really well with comedy. We've seen that with Thor and whatnot before. Again, this movie has so much heart. It's not just James Gunn. You want to give him a lot of credit because he wrote and directed the film, but you can tell that everyone that worked on these projects is super close. And James Gunn always likes to work with the same people. The cameos, Nathan Fillion was in here, Jennifer Holland. Then Nathan's stuff was really funny too. I know James Gunn's now the head of DC, so he's probably done with Marvel, at least for a while. Dave Bautista's done. Star-Lord will return, obviously, hence the end credit scene. Not in a Guardians film, I don't think. Maybe we'll see him in Avengers, other projects. He's on Earth, so we could see him anywhere. The Guardians could return because now they're led by Rocket. We got massive Groot. We got Adam Warlock. We got Cosmo. We got Kraglin. By the way, the stuff with Kraglin and the arrow and the moment with Yondu and him figuring that out, it comes from the heart. That was great too. I loved all that. What else? Oh, we got I could be wrong, but this is the first official F word, the first official fuck in the MCU, right? And it was just open the fucking door. I loved it. I say MCU because, the Fox Marvel movies don't count. I'm talking about Marvel Studios. This was the first F word, right? Perfect. I loved it because it was such an insignificant way to use it. It wasn't Wolverine saying, go fuck yourself. It was just a throwaway line. That line where Rocket goes, you didn't want to make things perfect. You just didn't like the way things are. That just sounds like something you could say to every politician. Or every pissed off extremist. Every drunk uncle at fucking family reunions, When the first Guardians came out in 2014, and people talk about this a lot, no one knew who characters like Groot and Rocket were. And people like to say that a movie about a talking raccoon in a tree became the biggest movie on the planet. Oh, wow. How'd that happen? What was so special about that film, obviously, I'm saying what you already know, was that it took characters that were unknown and borderline ridiculous and made us love them because, well, you, me, most of us were unknown. We're borderline ridiculous. We are ridiculous and we feel so insignificant all the time. And we feel like we're lost and we feel like we don't belong. I mean, the cast and their chemistry was great. It always has been. But these films really resonate with those who feel like they're on the outside or they feel alone. I mean, there's nothing worse than feeling alone. I think these films really resonate with those who are forced to find family outside of blood. Those who never really felt connected to their own family and had to make friends, and then their friends became their family. Or different variations of those sort of experiences, those sort of bonds. Because that's what we do every day, is we try to connect with people. Even the type of people who live their life because they want clout or they're just trying to take from people. They just don't understand that what they want is the approval of others because they want to be loved, because what they really want is to feel connected to other people. I don't know why the fuck I said all that. So I'm just going to say that this final film in the trilogy capitalizes on all of that. Everything that the first film laid down as a foundation, this film builds into a house in which Peter and his grandpa now live. That was a terrible analogy, but it feels special. It feels like that special thing that makes Rocket better than all the perfect ones, right? He has that thing. And in that way, this film feels like a commentary on the power of art, the power of creation, invention, inspiration, because it doesn't come from a place of perfection, even brilliance half the time. It's just chaos that happens inside us. Random moments of ridiculousness that somehow begin to make sense. Because true invention is through inspiration, and inspiration is just this whirlwind of chaos in a moment. And that brings us back to music, I think, because it's the power of music as well. All these films are about that, which is evident by the mid-credit scene where it's just the New Guardians talking about their favorite songs. Just a conversation about art, what they love about a certain art form. This film is just really about embracing the things that you love, embracing who you are. There's this whole thing where there's that moment where Rocket finally embraces his name. It's like when Wanda was finally referred to as the Scarlet Witch, Rocket is finally Rocket the Raccoon, because he's finally made peace with who he is, not what he is. And there's that moment when he's taking all the other raccoons, he's like, I am a raccoon. And dude, it's fucking beautiful. And then he says, I'm Rocket the Raccoon, essentially, when he has that showdown with the High Evolutionary. Fuck, and the High Evolutionary's face. Again, that was brutal. There's a lot of hugging in this film, and it feels like it's hugging me. It feels like it's hugging us. It feels like it hugged the world. And when Groot does finally speak English, of course it's to say, I love you guys. His family of imperfect nerds that I'd take over a perfect species any day. In conclusion, it's like a bad fucking essay. I love this film. I'll be curious to see what happens to the Guardians moving forward with Rocket and Kraglin and Groot and Adam and Cosmo. But everyone else, I think, got to ride off into the sunset in a beautiful way. This film met and exceeded my expectations. Shout out James Gunn. I know a lot of people are pissed that you're basically rebooting the whole DCEU after The Flash. But that's an impossible situation. And everything you've made, everything that I've seen you do has had a lot of fucking heart. So I can't imagine you aren't going to lead with that. I think I've been talking long enough. So that's all that I have. Big love to everyone who was bored enough to join me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drive me off of this platform if you must. Otherwise, like, subscribe. Dislike for cathartic reasons. Drink water, stay young, and remember, don't be an idiot, be a buffoon. Peace.